Leadership in Flow is so rich. The quiet leaders that we speak to do three things. They examine what they need to do, they experiment with new ideas and skills, and they explain with a clarity of thinking and communication. And that helps behavior change. When you have behavior change, you grow either in a personal level, as a leader, or as a business. My name is Shamini Sudan. Please join us for Leadership in Flow every Thursday at 6 p.m. Malaysia, Singapore time.
Hello, hello. Hi, Malhar. How are you?
Good, Sham. Good evening.
Good evening. Were you in the middle of doing something else and I caught you at it?
No. For some reason, I have a very serious energy today. Like I'm not feeling as relaxed as I usually. I think it must be the guest today.
It must be, yeah. It's very nice to blame somebody else. It's usually nice to blame the guest.
I won't use the word blame, but rather I feel I need to be in a Zen mode because we're talking about a topic that's quite Zen, which is well-being, right? On one hand, and then you're talking about how to be well at work. So I'm just trying to balance it up, and I think that's affecting my state. Anyway,
okay, that's a good rephrase, by the way. In some programs that I run, it's a very good rephrase and a reframe. Well done, you. So it's a good time for us on that note to introduce our guest for today. And our guest for today is Chris Cummings. If you are with us, joining us, either listening in or watching us, please, as usual, you know what to do. Put your questions and comments in chat, because Chris comes in today as Group CEO of Wellbeing at World. Now, he did not start his career in this space. He was very much in sales, Malhar, in media, in publishing, a lot of, in agency work, right? And then at some point he decided that he's going to do something different, because I'm looking at his CV in LinkedIn, and he moved into the space of well-being. So it'd be interesting to hear his backstory about it. And he also is, this one I thought was quite interesting. He's the co-founder of Inside Out Awards. It's an award dedicated to those practitioners and leaders in the well-being space. So I'm very excited to talk to Chris today about what he sees well-being, where is it heading in Asia plus globally. Can we bring him on? Are you going to do the honors and bring him on? Okay.
It's coming.
There he is. Hi, Chris.
Hi, how are you? Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and I'm more than happy to be blamed for you, Marla. So yeah, but please, you can relax and be zen during this. So thank you so much for having me.
You're most welcome. Thank you finally for, not finally saying yes. We said yes, but we just couldn't get our diaries to coordinate and behave themselves, right? So Chris, you're calling in from the UK, from Brighton in the UK. So it's very early. It's not very early in the morning. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, but you had an early start. And so thank you for joining us, and thank you for giving us your 1 hour to share with us and have a chat with us here in Singapore, Malaysia, and Asia about well-being. And I'm going to start, you might consider it as a very regular, very common question that you get asked, but the question I want to ask it anyway, right? So the question I'm going to ask you to get us started is your story, right? You took a little bit of a shift out of that space that you were in for a while in the beginning of your career to perhaps mid of your career, and you started well-being at work. So tell us the backstory, tell us the gossip. Actually, we want to know the dirty details. That's basically what we are.
Well, yeah, I will do my best. So yeah, thanks again for letting me join you on your conversation. Yeah, it's a very chilly -1 today in the UK. So we're all wrapped up, pretty warm. So yeah, delighted to be here. In terms of my story. So I worked in the corporate world for about 20 years, and thoroughly enjoying my time doing that. But it was actually my partner's condition, who has anxiety and depression, and subsequently had a really poor treatment at work because of that condition. And I obviously saw what happened at home and in our personal lives, and that sort of motivated me really to explore what I could do in a very small way to try and change the workplace and in particular leaders' attitude and organisations' approach really to well-being at work and mental health. So I quit my corporate job, and I wanted to bring a group of leaders together from organizations. We had some amazing passionate leaders join us at that first gathering in the UK, and really start to bring some of that evidence-based information, insights to the wider corporate world as to why we should really focus in on well-being at work and the benefits behind that. So you know, our ultimate aim is to make well-being a strategic priority in all organizations around the world. That wasn't how it started. I just wanted to try and change 1 or 2 workplaces in the UK at the beginning. But what happened is the conversation really mushroomed globally. More and more multinationals came to our gathering in the UK, told their colleagues internationally, and we started to bring that movement to other parts of the world. So we now take place in 8 geographical regions across the world, including in Asia, in Singapore. And it's really exciting to see, obviously, the last 2 or 3 years, that conversation really accelerate and the action within organizations really develop. If there's one silver lining from what we all went through with the pandemic, is I think it really elevated this conversation. So yeah, you know, I'm keen to make the world a better place, in the workplace in particular, and I can't do that alone. So having wonderful people like yourselves in our network to help further that message is wonderful.
It's 3 years and we still haven't figured it out, right? It's like you're on mute, Sham. You know, it's like really.
No, I was on mute, so even if I said you were muted, you won't hear me. So yeah.
Yeah. And I saw the movement of your head. I was going to tell what I was telling Chris in response to his sharing was that I know it's something that you may have shared very often. It's good for our viewers and listeners to hear your story, your backstory, and this is a generalization. I know. That sometimes we make that switch, we make that dramatic switch out of, you know, in your case, corporate world, to focusing on well-being, you know, and doing something about it, making it evidence-based because of something that happened in our lives. It's either us affected or someone very close to us, in your case, a partner who's affected to do that, right? Yeah. So and now you're spread across Australia, Asia. You are in Singapore and in India, right? You're doing work in Africa. You're doing work in Europe, in the UK, in the US, in South Africa as well. I mean, I'm just picking it up, right? So you've got a nice feel of well-being and how it's spoken about, how it's considered, how it's seen, how it's worked right across the world. And we're going to tap on that. I love the three words that you use consistently when you talk about well-being at work, right? You talk about community, you talk about connection, and you talk about knowledge. How do the three connect for you from your perspective?
So I think in terms of how those three areas, I mean, that's where we focus on. So if we talk about leaders on this journey to try and develop the well-being strategy within their organization, that knowledge piece is really important. You know, we're all on this journey together. We don't all have the answers. We're still trying to understand the best way forward for our organizations. So that knowledge really helps leaders to develop those strategies and to develop that journey. And so we want to support our communities around the world. We want to provide them with that knowledge and create an open environment where other organizations can share their stories as well. Because by sharing, we all learn more. So and through that, you start to build out communities, and I think communities are really powerful. You know, communities support each other. As I say, we don't have a blueprint. We don't have a book that says, here's the answer to all of your well-being issues. It's a journey, and it's continually evolving as organizations continue to evolve. So having that supportive community where you can connect, build your knowledge and be supported by both us and your peers and people within the community, I think is really powerful. And we're seeing that now really develop. And that's what we're all about. It's it's bringing people together. We're sharing best practice and hopefully having some positive outcomes off the back of that.
Nice. I'm just on that note going to share what Siobhan Hassan put on in the chat. Hi, Siobhan. Thank you for joining us. She said, you're doing incredibly meaningful work with the movement, Chris. I can hear the passion in your voice to lead well-being at work and help make the world a better place. Thank you for what you're doing, what you do, and for sharing your story. Okay.
Well, thank you, Siobhan, and lovely to meet you. It's certainly not just me; it's the whole community and the movement. I'm just the figurehead, really.
Great, that's a nice way of putting it. I'm going to ask the second question that would lead very nicely to Malar taking over, right? So we're talking about well-being here, right? And I mean, we've the more articles you read, the more more you listen to people. We have different ways of looking at well-being. So what, from your experience worldwide and talking to different leaders, in different sectors, in different stages of their business growth, what's the common definition of well-being that you think is universally accepted, right, by organizations and leaders? It's either not going to freak them out, or it gives them a sense, a sense of focus or direction in terms of, okay, this is something we can handle, and let's move with that. So what would that common definition be?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and again, I go back to that. Do we have a blueprint where we can say this size fits for everyone? I think it really depends on the organisation, the industry you're working in, the type of workers you have, the culture within the organisation. There's a number of factors, and if you think about if you have an organization where you have primarily office workers, they're going to have different needs to maybe a manufacturing company that would have slightly different challenges. So ultimately, for me, it's about creating an environment where people can thrive. And if people thrive, then organizations thrive. But what we have done based on all of the work we've done around the world is created a framework for organizations, and I'm happy to share that with you and the audience afterwards. But we've identified, and this is based on conversations we've had with our global advisory group over recent months, and also what we've heard at the summits, and we've identified 6 key areas that organizations should focus on to really create total well-being in our eyes. And you know, there's many organizations who will have pillars around financial well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being, and they're great, but they are focused really on the individual. And I think this framework that we've developed is more organizational. So the 6 key areas would be leadership. So if leadership are on board, then everything trickles down, and leadership can, you know, from everything from setting the tone, creating the culture, and I know we're going to talk more about leadership as we go through this webinar, so I can go into a bit more detail on that. Connection is another area. Now, we've all had a huge change in our working lives over recent years. Connection and how we can create a sense of belonging and connection, because workplaces are communities. They're communities of people that are driving something together, whether that be a product or a service. So that connection piece is really important. Equity is our 3rd area. Everyone needs to feel a sense of belonging and be in a safe space. So equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging is a key area to our well-being. Personalisation is our next area, and this sort of goes back to what I was talking about before. You know, we're human beings, we're complex creatures, and we all have different needs. So having that one-size-fits-all well-being strategy may work for some parts of your organisation and some people within there, but it doesn't work for all. So that personalisation, I think, is going to become more and more important for organizations. Purpose, I think every organization and every employee wants to be linked to a purpose within their organization, and by being in an environment where you're really connected to that purpose means you will thrive. And our final one is the environment. So and this covers 2 areas really. The environment you're working in. Are we in an office or are you at home? You know, that's really that can really influence our well-being. But the wider context, what are we doing about the wider social environment? And I think that's playing a key role now across the world as a focus for people to really feel like they're linked to something much bigger. So those would be the 6 areas that we feel organizations should focus on. Some organizations are doing really well in 4 areas, but might have 2 areas that they want to focus on. Others might want to look at one particular area, but we feel that if you can get those 6 areas really working well, then you can create a really strong well-being strategy within your organization, and people can thrive.
Okay, let me make sure we've got it. I got it right? So I can put it down on chat for people to read. So it's leadership, it's connection, it's equity, it's personalization, it's purpose, and the 6th one is environment.
That's it. Yeah, and happy to share that. We've got like a framework that we use that, and we're happy to share that.
Nice. Hello, over to you. You're muted, Dee.
Thank you. Thank you for saying it. Actually, you've taken my mind. So you actually brought up a very important question, and I think I love the framework. And I'm sure when I read what you're going to send to us, it's going to be exciting, because I think very often when we talk about well-being, we are always only looking at personal well-being, and especially back at work, I think it's so important to prioritize it. And you had mentioned something along the line of strategic priority, and I like the word. So I'm just wondering, right? If and so what I'm getting out of it is that you're already looking at well-being as a strategy, right, within the organization, right? And to set that as a priority. So if we just look at it as a strategy per se, right? How do based on the work that you've actually been doing, right? When we talk about strategy, the whole idea of setting it as strategic priority is that it brings about benefit to the organization. So, what are the benefits that organizations are buying into first?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of the reasons why you should make well-being a strategic priority, I think one of the most pressing issues that certainly leaders are facing in recent months has been talent. So whether that be attracting a talent or retaining talent. Now, if you ask most leaders what young people are asking in interviews now, it's not just how much are you going to pay me? It's what's your strategy around well-being? What's the culture like in the organization? What's your purpose within your organization? What's the flexibility you're going to provide in terms of working patterns and how that's going to be? So looking back at that framework, that's where we came out of with those areas to focus on, because that's essentially what people are asking for when they're choosing their next job. It's not just about the salary like it used to be. So if there's some really good research from Gallup that covers this, about what really makes employees choose an organization, what makes them stay, and so if you're not doing this sort of work, if you're not focused on this, if this is not part of your priority, like it is in so many other areas of the business, like operations, marketing, sales, then you are really reducing the opportunity of attracting the right talent. But also, are you going to retain the best talent? Because they now have of choice, and organizations who are prioritizing this are really attracting that talent. I think secondly as well, and again, there's far more evidence and research around this now, about how organizations who prioritize well-being generally outperform their competitors by between 15 and 20%. So if the bottom line is the only reason you want to do this, then the evidence shows that you will perform much better as an organization. You will be more profitable as an organization, because when employees are in flow, when we as humans are in flow, when we're performing at our best, when we feel comfortable, when we feel in the right place, when we're linked to the purpose and we've got great leadership, we will perform so much better. I've been in toxic environments where, in my previous life, in corporates, where I was in toxic environments and I didn't perform well. And now that I'm in an environment that is allowing me to be myself and supporting my well-being, I'm performing the best I possibly can, and so is the rest of the team. So I think it really does work for the bottom line. I don't think that should be the only reason you do this. There's many other reasons why you should focus on well-being, but if it is all around the P&L, then the evidence suggests that you will perform much better.
Nice. Thank you, Chris. So I think, I mean, these are areas that we have been talking about, right, Sham, in our leadership in flow, because we know the core of, organizational success or business successes is really, having the right talent, not just attracting them, but engaging them and retaining them. And that would mean that in our language, being at optimal performance and being in flow state. Thanks for saying that, right? Now, just now you did mention about strategic priority, right? So I'm just wondering whether I've understood this correctly. If an organization sets well-being as a strategic priority, right? Am I right in saying that when we set it as a strategic priority, right? What we will see is the framework that you shared with us, which means that, the strategic priority will show up in leadership, in connection, in equity, personalization, purpose, and environment. Did I get that right?
Yeah, so those 6 areas are what we believe are the areas that you should focus on to achieve the ultimate well-being at work. If we want to go in through the detail of that, I'm talking about every touch point. So, when we talk about leadership, how are leaders communicating externally and internally? Are we prioritizing the health of our people? There was a number of CEOs who spoke openly during the pandemic, saying the health of our people is our number one priority. And so, that shouldn't be the case just during the pandemic. It should be the case all the time. So what procedures, what cultures are we creating in organizations that promote healthy environments? Do we place equity as a strategic priority in an organization? Are we monitoring that in our annual reports? Some companies are now actively promoting these numbers. So that's the sort of thing that I mean by strategic priority. It's every touch point within an organization. So, you might think of onboarding when a new employee comes on board. What during your onboarding process is well-being part of that process? Do you talk openly about the well-being, making sure that you as a new employee feel really welcome, you feel supported, and you feel able to speak up if you are overworked and stressed, because those cultures that where people can speak up, then things can be about it. So it's every touch point within an organization, and if we get that right, then you can see the real flow, as you say.
Thank you. Yeah, I know that. I think the voice came faster when.
Sorry.
We're just far apart. So what I like is that actually we're looking at well-being as a strategy. And when you talk about touch point, it sounds to me like we're setting a well-being culture, and we're looking at all the things that we need to do in terms of checkpoints to make sure that it's aligned to make well-being the outcome, right? Which then shows up in optimal performance, in people being in flow state. And that would then mean that we will get to first attract the people and keep them and continue doing that, which then would probably lead to long-term organizational excellence. So well-being is now, driving organizational excellence is what I'm hearing, right? But Chris, I want to. I'm very curious, right? So I think there are two parts with well-being that I struggle with when I meet, right? So we meet great leaders, we meet wonderful people. This is a very nice piece of conversation. It's a nice. It creates
Feel
nice
good.
feeling. Yeah, it's a feel-good topic, right? I'm looking after my people. I care for my people, right? On one hand, we can say all the right things. But I often find leaders really struggling with having to really care for people, which means that I don't overwork them in whatever that means, right? Because we're looking at really having some time to rest and recuperate, right? And in some cultures, we are so used to work addiction, right? Working with lean resources, with minimal resources, additional hours. That's been the culture, right? So on one hand, we're saying, I care for you, right? And we introduce ideas like, a life, quality and stuff like that on one hand. So we're doing this. On the other hand, we are cutting down resources that's available for people, right? How do you find successful leaders or organization bringing this two together? What's the practice that you've seen?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the two can sit together. So I'd like to talk about the sporting world as an example. So if you talk to any high-performing athlete, the most important part of their training is rest and recuperation. So what's the difference between getting the gold medal and the silver medal and the bronze medal between in the 100-meter sprint at the Olympics? How does someone, because we can all have the best physical training and the best coaches that they're available for everyone. What makes you go just that millisecond quicker than your competitor in that race? And I would say the two things are that the mindset, so working purely on the mind, because the physical training, everyone will be doing very similar things. And the second is the rest and recuperation. So there's lots of evidence now around peak performance, high performance. How do you achieve high performing teams? And if we continue to push these long hours over a long period of time, what happens is burnout. And 33% of Asian workers in 2022 reported burnout. So if we have long periods of time where we have very, very long hours, the quality of work goes down, the performance goes down. So you might think because you're working all of these long hours over a long period of time, you're actually doing great work, but you're not. The quality of the work goes down and the performance goes down, and you end up with burnout. So yes, we all have busy periods. I'm not talking from a perspective of well-being. We need to do a couple of hours work a day and lots of yoga and be zen and living in a dream world. I know, having worked in the corporate world, I know the pressures that are there, and I know in my own business there are deadlines and there are pressures and there are stresses. The difference is we build in rest and recuperation for our teams. So if we do have a busy period over a number of weeks with some tight deadlines and some long hours, we make sure that's not the norm. We build in some time where people can rest and recuperation, because then they will come back so much more energized just with a short amount of time rest, to then go on to the next project really energized and high performing. So I think we do need to turn turn this around and change the culture where we think that long hours is achieving the best results, because the evidence shows that it doesn't. And we have to make sure our people are high performing. So I would say, if you know, there's lots of evidence, and I would point you towards Bruce Daisley, who used to be the European director of Twitter. He's now done a lot of research around the optimum number of hours per day where you really do perform at your highest, and after that the performance really drops off, and the quality of work really drops off. So you're not really helping anyone, including yourself, by working much longer hours.
Yeah, but so Chris, this evidence that you're putting out, I think is something that has been out there for a long time, as long as stress management has been out, because we talk about positive stress and then we talk about negative stress. So the data has been there, right? And the data has been there for a while, right? I'm very curious to know. So you said two things, which is really important. Understanding the importance of rest and relax to recuperate. So how biologically you just need to recuperate and not overworking yourself. And of course the mindset, how we think about well-being, what our beliefs about well-being. And we know we had different belief systems, right? Now, and what you're saying is, for me, it's not new, because we know this thing about burnout. We know people were stressed. We know people were working long hours. We know all of that, right? But if you look at the organizations where they have successfully shifted, right? How did they do that?
Yeah, so if I talk about particular organizations in Asia, as we've got an Asia-based audience, I think I've seen financial institutions based in Asia do a number of things. So one has been the shift to authentic leadership. So from the top, the leadership have spoken openly, and set the tone for a culture that is supportive of their employees. Now, of course, there's a job to be done. There are risks to be hit. There are targets to be hit, and so be it. And it's a fast-paced environment in the financial world. But that recognition that actually, if we push people too far, we will end up having so many people off with burnout and sickness that actually it's not worth it, because by pushing people that far, you end up with a really reduced workforce, and you're not going to be able to be as productive. So I think there's been a couple of really good examples from financial institutions where they've really focused in on developing their leaders and setting the tone across the whole organization to ensure that people are fully aware, and that line manager level as well, to really look after the teams, to make sure that if one is showing signs of burnout or poor mental health, that prevention piece, doing something before it's too late, is really important. We've seen some great. I saw a great presentation at our Australia summit by the head of people for the Body Shop, and they're really focused in around purpose. So they've obviously got he's based in Singapore, and he looks after the APAC region, but based in Singapore, and really working hard on that purpose piece. And I think that's, it's an organization with a strong sense of purpose, but the employees are really have really bought into that purpose, and they feel part of that movement, and that feels really exciting. And he's seeing some great results from that. It doesn't necessarily, have to be about you must take an hour for yoga. Actually, you can have purpose being a real driver for well-being within an organization. And I've also seen one or two leaders, and you'll be able to find these on the internet, I'm sure, actually talking about their own personal experiences. And we've seen that in Asia, and they've spoken openly about their own journey. And I think storytelling is really powerful, especially from leadership, because again, it sets the tone. And yeah, I as I say, I've seen some really interesting personal stories from some pretty major board level executives within institutions across Asia, and it's really helped to break that stigma within those organizations, and it really has set the tone to a much brighter, open culture within the organization. And the results speak for themselves, because those results have been really strong financially. So it does affect the bottom line as well.
So there are some things that so that you just shared some things that work specifically with the financial institution, right? I want to take it up 2 notches in terms of getting a little bit more big picture, right? What do you think, based on your experience running the summits and the masterclasses right across 8 locations? I think it's a little bit more now. What do you see seems to be working from an Asian context, not just from, like, say, the financial institution, but generally across all the locations in Asia? What tends to be working? That's one. That's different, or yeah, let's say it's different from what you see working elsewhere. And then the next question then is, if you go one level further up, macro, what are patterns that you see happening right across the world globally from taking the first pillar, leadership, right? In terms of what patterns do you see the challenges that the leadership is facing when they think along the routes of well-being and integrating that into their strategy, or making it a strategic priority? So 2 questions there. So one is the patterns that you see happening in Asia, and what then globally are some challenges, from the leadership perspective in making well-being a strategic priority.
So I would say, look, we are all organizations are led by human leaders. We're all human. So I think what happens in the US, in Europe, in Australia, and in Asia, whilst there are local nuances and slight differences, I think a good pattern or good behavior is good in any part of the world. I would say the biggest lesson, if I'm trying to give some takeaways for the audience, would be, everyone talks about a pulse survey and employee surveys and asking what employees think. Are you asking around people's well-being in that survey? And if you are you listening and acting on the results of that? So I've seen many success stories, both in Asia and around the world, where an employee survey has gone out. They've included 3 to 5 questions specifically around the employee's well-being, and based on those results, they have acted on it. So if there has been a specific issue in a particular team, they've gone into that team and acted on it and changed it. That has made a significant improvement. The biggest mistake organizations and leaders do is do a poll survey or an employee survey, get some results, and don't do anything about it. You know, listening to your employees, acting on that, and really developing. Now, I'm not saying that every single thing that an employee brings up in an employee survey should be acted on, but you will start to see trends. You're asking for feedback. So if you're getting that feedback, please do something about it, and you'll start to see trends in particular departments, in teams, and then you can start to implement the training and the development that is required to help that. So I've seen that both in Asia and outside of Asia, and I think specifically to Asia, I'm seeing a shift. It's a slow shift, but I'm seeing a shift around the stigma on mental health. We're seeing organisations now like Forward Alive have been in Hong Kong for many years, but have now launched in Singapore. And I was at their launch event last year. Many leaders from organizations were on the stage talking openly about the importance of breaking that stigma. And there was a wide range of industries represented there. So professional services, legal, FMCG, the food and drinks industry. You know, there was lots of organizations putting themselves on the stage, leaders who are putting themselves on the stage saying, now is the time for Asia to break this stigma. We are going to do everything we can as an alliance to really drive that. So we are seeing some developments, and I appreciate there are cultural differences in different parts of the world, but I'm confident that you know, that there are passionately. I'm seeing many similarities in Asia to what I saw in the UK 5 or 6 years ago, when you have the brave few that start the conversation, and then the momentum builds, and I think that's what's happening in Asia now, and I think there's a bright future ahead.
If I were to ask you, Chris, we would flip it to the other extreme, right? What would be like a big, and this might be an obvious question, but what would be like the biggest stumbling block leaders in organizations have if they want to make well-being a strategic priority? What could trip them up? What's the biggest thing that will trip them up, and you know, spoil their plans of making it something, you know, strategic, or part of that whole infrastructure, right, of business growth?
Well, I think like implementing anything new, there are going to be some bumps in the road. So I think the only thing that would trip them up is themselves. I think if you're determined enough to make this a strategic priority, and leaders are used to bumps in the road, and they usually navigate themselves around that and push ahead. So there are a number of challenges, and I'm not saying this is easy by any stretch. You know, this is a tough thing to do, and it takes bold leadership, and leaders themselves have got a number of things going on, you know, whether that be economic challenges, whether that be talent retention challenges, economic and geopolitical challenges. There's a number of things that leaders have got on their plate. So I'm not saying this is easy. However, again, going back to the evidence on why this should be a priority, and looking at the immediate challenges that they have around talent, especially, I think, Yes, there will be some bumps in the road. Yes, the finance director might question the investment, but you know, I think as leaders, push ahead, gain the evidence that you need, look at what other organisations and your competitors are doing, and push ahead with this, because you will see the performance increase. As I say, 20% forming your competitors who don't do this, and ultimately, my view is it's the right thing to do. Work shouldn't make us sick, and we should be our work life should enhance us. It should give us a sense of purpose, and it should be hugely enjoyable. Yes, there are going to be good and bad days, but ultimately it should not make us sick, which is what's happening at the moment.
That's a really good quote. Work shouldn't make us sick. I'm going to put it down in the chat, in the comments.
Well,
Go.
oh gosh. Okay. Yeah, because work shouldn't make us sick. Really stuck, and gave me a reaction. So thanks for that, Chris. What I was actually hearing when you were describing leadership, I love what you said about right thing to do, and basically what you're calling leaders to do is that let's become relevant, right? Let's become relevant. Look at the data and patterns and what's happening to our people and performance. What we used to believe and what is showing up, and lead accordingly is what I'm hearing, right? Which brings me to what you said earlier in terms of how leaders have shifted. And you said that, with organizations that where it's working, you see authentic leadership, right? So, yeah, and of course, I have my own definition of authentic leadership. But, help us understand what do you mean by authentic leadership, one, right? And help us understand what do you mean by authentic leadership, as a style that actually strategizes well-being.
Yeah, I think look, the skill set and what organizations across the world are looking from their leaders has shifted. I think we've seen that a lot over recent years, and the expectation from employees has changed as well. So if we go back many years ago, when I first started working nearly 30 years ago, my boss would be banging the desk and demanding that, this is how we do things here. It hasn't changed. It's all very quite aggressive, and that was the skill set and the culture and what leaders were told to do, really. And this is how we do it here. I think that's shifted. Of course, there are still leaders in that mold, but I think if you look at the news this morning, Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand, Prime Minister, stepping back, and bringing that authentic self to a leadership role. And we see that with some great leaders. I personally think she's a great leader. I think she's been her authentic self throughout. She's principled, and she's done a great job, and is leaving on her terms, because it's right for her and her family. But for the last 6.5, 7 years, I think she's done a great job. Now, to me, is authentic leadership. She hasn't sugarcoated anything. She's been honest and not. Sometimes people aren't going to agree with your policies or the direction, but she's shown, I think, really strong leadership in an authentic way without banging the desk like my old boss used to do.
Nice. Well, I'm her ardent fan, and I think when I actually when Shamini told me about her resignation, and I read, and when she said, "I don't have enough in the tank," I think that spoke very loudly about what does it mean to be real, right? Because when we realize that we are running out of energy to give our best self, then what is the right thing to do? So while she seemed to be making the right choice for her as a leader, she's also making the right choice for people, because you did mention about doing the right thing. So as leaders, we know what is the right thing that is required for the people who make us successful, right? And what we do, we tend to do is that we tend to go another way, right? Even though we know it's not right. I mean, if people are getting sick because of work, we know that's not the right thing. If we know, if we know people are not having enough time with their families, we know that's not the right thing, right? So there are a lot of things that we know is not right, but it will take leadership courage, and like what you said, staying real with the issues at hand to actually deal with it. So I think fantastic. I think that's where I can see authentic leadership sitting in, and that becomes important, to be real, to deal with real issues that's coming through in today's working world, and what people need. So thank you very much, Chris, because I think you've given us a lot. I think because well-being is not a new topic, but I think what is amazing is that you've given us really very practical tips on the overview and the framework that is required, the change of mindset and action that is required, and why it has to be a strategic priority for the business, because this is going to drive the business today, for us to not just stay relevant, but to perform at our best and get the best results, which then will put you ahead of your competitors. So thank you very much. I really learned a lot, and as I say that, I'm going to let Shamini say her thank you before we say goodbye to you.
Yeah, I like the one that you say you better look at the competition. Because if you're not looking at what the competition is doing, at the very basic, and also what you said earlier on, really at the start, when you said, if nothing else, if you want to make sure that you are performing as an organization, then look at what the competition is doing and do something. If not, your talent is going to run away. That's my connection, right? The talent that you want is going to run away to the competition or elsewhere. Before we say thank you and let you go, Chris, any last words that you have for our viewers, listeners, for them to take away in terms of well-being at work?
Well, thank you both. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for allowing me to join you. As I said towards the end, this is not easy, but the most rewarding things are not always easy. So make sure you have a support network. Make sure you communities feel part of something, feel supported. And if you're trying to figure out where to even begin, then to reach out to myself or others who have started this journey, because it can be a lonely place doing this, and so if you can find that support network, you will have some bumps in the road, but believe me, when you start to see the results coming through, it's an amazing feeling. So good luck, and if we can support you in any way, then we'd be delighted to.
Thank you, Chris. Good luck on your summits for this year and your master classes for this year. And I'm sure we're going to be catching up, at some point. And hopefully, when you are in Singapore, we'll take you for. If Malar is not here, I'll take you for an Indian meal, the real Indian meal. All right, not chicken tikka masala.
That sounds amazing. I love Indian food, and yeah, looking forward to coming to Singapore in April and seeing you there.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Chris. Bye. Okay, Muller. So we've got some wonderful quotes from Chris today, isn't it? I'm like, which one do we use? Which one do we use? Very good.
So my most favorite is going to be work shouldn't make us sick, because everything else supports that. So that's the strategic vision that Chris has left for, well, at least.
Yeah. And the last one, he said, the most rewarding things are never easy. Yeah. Right. So yeah, I'm super happy with our discussion today around well-being and how to think about well-being. I love the six pillars, the six framework, the pillars that make up that framework. I think that's something very, very useful for organizations to start, or leaders to start thinking about well-being, right? Sometimes you may have to start at the team level before it goes to your organization. On that note, from my side, I think we've come to the end of our third episode for season 2 and our third episode for January. Next week, we put everything together, the first, all 3 guests and what they've shared in terms of quick wins for leaders. We put it all together into a summary discussion, as we usually do to close the month. So on that note, I'm going to wish you all a good evening and hand it over to Malar to say her bye-byes.
Right. So, yeah, this is bye-bye from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So thank you for joining us in Leadership in Flow Asia. And we hope to bring you more relevant topics to, for us to all live better lives. As we do that, remember to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify and connect with us on LinkedIn so that we can bring you, more relevant topics and speakers. With that, this is Malar signing off. Bye. Have a good evening.